All right, guys, so today we're going to be looking at color theory, and there's kind of two different ways you can look at color. And one is the scientific aspect of it, and then the idea of color, and the theory of color, specifically in terms of how color can be used in art, and the different ways that artists use color to produce a specific idea or concept or emotion that they're wanting to portray. And then, of course, a color psychology, where it's in kind of on purpose, with intent to usually evoke specific emotions, and you can do that in the idea of the artist just using colors to evoke the emotions they're feeling. Color psychology can go even further when you look at advertisements and ads, where they're using it to try to almost manipulate how people feel or respond to specific things. So let's look at the scientific component first, and just address kind of the structure of how we see how we see light and color together. So the first part is that combination, color and light. And what goes on with how we see color is that we cannot perceive color without light, right? Which is why, right, if you close your eyes, especially if there's no light shining in, or you're not in a room that has light, everything is completely black. Or if you are in an area that is absent of all light, it is going to be pitch black, because you need light to perceive color. But it goes more than that with just how we see that color with light in of itself. So if white or normal light passes through a prism, so normal light goes through a prism, what happens is that we see that it ends up being comprised of colors. Okay, so why is that? Why, when you have a prism, and we'll look at a picture in just a second, why is it that it makes up of different things? Because it's made up of different wavelengths. And our perception of color then with this is really an interaction between light and the object or surface and of the pigment. So perception of color is the interaction between light and in the surface specifically that we're seeing, and with that, and what pigment is in the object. And again, I'll show a picture of this in just a second. But with this idea, it's essentially let's go back here. Light is necessary to essentially activate the object for us to see any type of color. Light alone does not determine color, though. It is also pigment. Okay, so an example of this would be which is in your book, and we're going to show the picture, is the sweater, right? So let's say you have a blue sweater, okay, and it is blue when the light strikes it. Okay, so when the light is reflecting off of it, it is blue. And so why, if light consists, so, and here's the thing, right? We see all the colors, or most of the colors that the visual eye can see when a light goes through a prism. So why is it then that if light technically consists of all color in the spectrum, how is it that we only see the blue in the sweater? We only see the colors in the objects that they, because that's the portion of light spectrum that surface is not absorbing and ends up reflecting back to us. So again, with that, yes, you have all colors of spectrum in light, okay, but we see a specific color because that color is, and specifically the surface, it definitely has to do with the type of surface of it, but we'll say the color and surface, okay, fails to absorb that light and reflects off. Oops, instead. Okay, so let's take a look. But the idea is, right, with the sweater, with the blue sweater. Sorry, one more thing, and then we'll take a look, because I want to make sure this is clear with this. The surface of the sweater, for example, right, sweater, it contains blue pigment. Okay, if it's a blue sweater. And so when the light reaches the surface of that blue sweater, okay, then all other colors in the spectrum are absorbed. And then what's reflected back is blue. Okay, so hopefully that is clear. That way it's broken down for you, right? That's the steps of the scientific part of it. So let's take a look at this. Here is to show you how we see the visible spectrum of light, because there are more colors than we can see. So the prism reflects the light hits the prism, it reflects, and then what we get to see are those visible spectrum of colors. Then if you take the blue sweater, okay, the blue sweater, the object has blue pigment in it, and this is a good, shows you, right, all of the colors with the light hits it, but because of the pigment, the only one reflected back is blue, which is what we see, whereas all of the other colors get absorbed. So that's the scientific way of how we see color, and kind of how our eyes produce that. And of course, it depends on the person, sometimes what you can see or not see, because that does change depending on someone, for example, who's colorblind. And can only see certain types of colors, then that has to do with what your eyes are reflecting back. So, which is why it's the glasses on certain types of color blindness work. They have the special sunglasses that you can put on because it corrects that. But it only works for certain types of color blindness because there's different issues with the eyes for why things aren't getting reflected and what is being processed to the brain. Okay, so that's that part of it. So what we're going to look at next is additive versus subtractive color, because there's two different ways with this. And one is going to be with light, and then the other is going to be with art, with pigments like paint and colored pencils and things like that. So there's two types, and if you hear this as far as additive versus subtractive color. So mixing colors of light is different than colors of pigment. Think about when someone might mix colors of light, what would you be doing for that? Right, most likely light shows, concerts, on movie sets, right? That's when you have people who mix different colors for those shows. Like Disneyland has like the World of Color, where they have a whole show with it. But any type of stage is going to have colors of lights, and that's going to follow then the additive component to it. So pigment, and why is this different? Why does it matter when you're mixing colors with light versus with pigments like, again, paint or dye or things like that? Well, pigment has one, it's solid matter, right? And light is made from waves of energy. So one, just I guess the type of thing it is very, very different. One is solid matter, one is not. And so that naturally is going to influence how we're doing it. Think it back to the blue sweater, and that you had that pigment that with all those lights, the light with all the potential colors reflecting off of it, and the physical pigment in that sweater and the physical object of the sweater reflect off a specific color where everything else gets absorbed. That only happens if you have something that's interacting with a physical component. And light eventually hits something, but the colors that they're mixing to produce different things, like on a stage or in a concert, you're creating those colors with light, not because of a physical pigment or object. So for example, if we shine two color beams of light onto the same spot on a white surface, the two colors end up appearing brighter than the original two. This will be the opposite when you use pigment. So with light, let's put it here. If you mix, we'll say shine, because I mean you're mixing, but if you shine two colors, color beams of light, just it says light, but just to be specific here with that, right? Onto the same spot. That is a white background, because if you have a different colored physical surface, that's going to change things, right? Well, what happens is that the resulting color of those mixing, the resulting mix of those two colors becomes brighter than the original. Right, and this is because adding two colors increases the brightness and that's because it's with light, and this is called additive. Right, again, pigment is going to be subtractive of color, but that one's there. Two different colors of paint or pigment. Here, let's do D here. So pigment. So with pigment, if you have two different colors, colored paints that have they're going to have pigment in them. Two different colors of paint are mixed together. The result is not brighter, but duller. It ends up duller. And that's called, this is subtractive. And that's because the pigment mixture is more, right, just like the sweater, added, you have more mixture. I don't want to use the word added and confuse you. More pigment, which happens when you mix stuff together, right? Mix colors together means that more of the spectrum of light or of color from the light is absorbed. And so then that means that it's going to be a duller color. Okay, so that's still part of the scientific component of it, but it shows you the difference in how you use color in lights versus how you use color with things that are physical objects with pigment. And so someone who is playing with colors and what they want to produce when they're doing stages and things like that have to actually mix colors differently than how you would with paints and physical objects and things like that. So we're mostly going to be looking at with pigment, because within art it's not that there aren't light shows that could be considered art, but for the majority of art you're working with pigments and various surfaces that are then reacting with the subtractive method rather than the additive. But I think it's important to know the difference because, like I said, it's interesting. They have these color sheets for lights, and so you put the color sheets in the light, and then it shines. The white light shines through the color, and then shows up on the surface. And when you're mixing those, right, then you have to pay attention to what colors you want, and how you do it is not the same on the color wheel as when it's with pigment. And so, like I said, people have to learn very differently when they're doing that. Okay, so let's do a little bit of, I think we're on 3 here, actually, vocabulary that has to do with the color wheel, because the color wheel is important. In that it gives us and gives artists a way to quickly examine what colors are going to mix, what colors are going to be complementary, what colors are going to be analogous, which colors work with each other. And it's also just a way to organize and establish the relationship of colors. I mean, that's really the function of the color wheel, is to create an organized system of relationship. And this is started with primary colors. And primary colors, are ones that most people should know. You learn them in elementary school. It's the 3 main primary colors: red, yellow, and blue. And these are primary colors because you can't mix something to get them. And then you mix these to get a whole bunch of other colors. So the primary colors are usually seen as foundational colors. And artists often work with these just alone to learn color and to practice with trying to work with a limited set of colors to express an idea, where then you focus on the value and the value scale of each of these to portray what you want, and then you can get more complex as you go. There's kind of a saying within art, as far as that, like, more color palette of paint or watercolors, or which is paint, I guess, or colored pencils or crayons or whatever, pastels, whatever you're using, that too many color options can be detrimental. Because then you start to, either one, you lose sight of what the focus of what you're wanting to do with the color in your art is. It also makes it easy to use colors that don't go together, as well as ultimately not focusing on how you can work with a color in a way to portray what you're wanting to do. You stop forgetting about the color, and just because you have such a wide selection. But when you go and you focus on the fundamental colors of just the primary colors, it forces you to think about how you're going to use and express what you're drawing or painting with just some basic colors and the realization that you can. Even a more specific thing than that is to pick one color, the monochromatic range of blue, of red, of yellow, where you're looking at all the different shades and values and only using that color in art. Right, so then from primary colors, you have secondary colors. And secondary colors are created from mixing primary colors, right? So mixing primary colors. And when you mix those, you get orange, green, and purple. And then lastly, you can kind of go further than this, but these are the main groups. You have tertiary colors. And tertiary colors are by mixing one primary and one secondary color. Okay, and those are we have a little bit larger variety, and it's two colored descriptors, right? So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, or blue, purple, right? I could put here. Purple is also, actually let's put in parentheses. You'll see it as violet. So I'll just do blue, I'll do blue purple here. But if you see it as blue violet, same thing. Come on, purple. Red, purple. Yellow, orange. And blue, green. Okay, so why are these important to know? Well, one, it's important to know what happens when you mix colors. So that if you are so for example, especially in painting, because it's not always as intentional. But like you have to, if you're doing colored pencils, like you really have to intentionally mix together. But even then, knowing that if you mix this color and this color together, it's going to create this color. But think about watercolor, for example. If you're watercoloring, often the color spreads out into the water. And then if you're putting down another color to do something nearby, those colors often mix intentionally or not. And so you have to be very careful as well as intentful on what colors you're using next to each other, so you're aware of, if they mix, what colors it's going to create. Because if you mix too many of these colors together, it ultimately turns into brown, gray, which becomes a neutral color because of where it is on the color wheel. So let's take a look at this. I think I put the color wheel a little bit later, but nope, I did next. Good. So this, and there's really detailed color wheels. This just shows the basic. You can actually like buy a color wheel that spins, and so you pick any color and you spin it to the color you want to show what it will mix with, so that you know, like, oh, this neutralizes it and it's going to create gray, or this creates kind of a muddy brown. Here are the different tints, or here's the different shades of that color. It's really, really useful tool for artists. But again, it is just an organizational thing. The purpose of the color wheel is to give us a sense of how things blend, right? And so you have though it's red, so it's not showing up, right? Red, blue, and yellow. And then when you mix those together, right, then you're going to get the green, orange, and violet or purple as a secondary. And then you have the tertiary. Here, we'll number them this way. Right, so the ones, the twos, And then these are the threes, the tertiary colors. And that then you can see, and what's cool, like I said, about the actual color wheels that you can buy is that, like, I could spin this around and see what would happen if I do violet with yellow, or red with green, or even yellow green with red violet, and what it creates. But it develops in the sense of creating a triangle for the colors, and that you have these connections for not only what they produce, but what goes with them. So again, the importance of that is not only organization, but as an important tool for helping being able to understand how color works with this kind of vocabulary here, the color wheel. Let's go here. We also have a few other terms that are important to know. One that's used is tint, and tint is when you add white to the color. Then you have tone, which is when you add gray to the color, and then you have shade, which is when you add black to the color. And then hue is the color. Okay, now the next thing we want to look at for here is color temperature. And color temperature blends in and merges with color psychology and color theory in many ways. Because what happens with color temperature is that we associate color with temperature. And that has to do with our experiences with really in many ways the natural world, and you know, how we observe a sunset or the sun and the color, or when it's cold and rainy and what colors that has what not colors, but what colors is produced, but also the temperature that we feel with that. So this is definitely based on previous experience for how much you will associate with a color with a specific temperature. Although it's pretty much ingrained not only in what we visually see and experience, but then what it's reproduced in artwork, in TV, in kind of everything around us, advertisements as well. And the thing is that our perception of color, of the temperature of color, can be altered on purpose if it's placed next to a similar color. So our perception of temperature of color can be altered if placed next to a similar color. My dog is running around like a crazy person in the background. So what it means like this is that it's relative to what colors are next, whatever colors are next to each other can change our perspective. But if you're looking at it in kind of the general view, you have two main types. You have warm colors, and warm colors are yellow, orange, yellow-orange, which of course just a derivative of those two, red, red-orange, and the violet red or purple red. I say purple, violet's more accurate, but I like to say purple instead of violet. So think about with these, right? Why do these colors evoke warm feelings? Let's go with that, right? What about where in life do we see those colors that are end up being warm? Well, fire, right? Are those colors? Sun. You see almost all these colors in like a sunset and sunrise. So you think about or like a hot summer day. So it's not surprising that they evoke a sense of warmth, because there's physical things in our life that produce warmth or heat that we see in those colors. Likewise, you have cool colors, and those are yellow, green. Let's move this up here. It's gonna let me. Green, blue, green, of course, and then blue. Blue, purple, and purple. So same thing, right? Think about what are things in life that create a sense or evoke, what did I say, that evoke a feeling of cool temperature, right? Well, the water, I think of like the ocean, blue skies can potentially be warm if it's blue skies and the sun was out bearing down on you, but then you have that kind of combination of that. But with the sun being the yellow and the orange and red colors. But okay, so trees, ocean, water, makes you think of breeze in that sense. Those type of things are what we see, that we have those feelings because we felt that when we're seeing those colors. So again, your perception of warm and cool temperature of color very much comes from experience, and then is reinforced in TV, art, books, everything. Because if you read a book and they're trying to describe a type of temperature or weather, they often will use cool or warm colors to do so. So it is experience, but it is also just kind of life reinforcing it in all of these ways. Okay, that's for the color temperature. What's important with the color temperature? Well, this can be used in art, and we're going to look at some examples in a little bit. So that like if an artist is wanting to evoke a sense of a warm, cozy environment, they're going to use warmer colors than cool colors. If you're trying to create an oceanside scene that's with a cool temperature breeze, you're going to use the cool color temperatures to do that. It would look off if you were trying to evoke a sense of like being, like I said, by the ocean on a cool winter's night, or like a snow field where you're, or like in a forest with snow on like some cabin or something, and then you used all these red and orange colors. It just doesn't work. You have to, even if you have white for some of the snow, you can't just have all white. You're going to be having shades of blue, and especially blue, some blue purple, to reflect that sense of snow and cold. And so just if you try to imagine it with the warm colors, it doesn't work. It then creates this odd, weird scene. Where you can play with this as an artist is actually like, think about if you're trying to create like an alien landscape. Artists in like sci-fi images and art will often transpose color temperatures so that it looks alien or foreign and gives off this sense of weird or other. And that's intentional. So again, you use it either to, artists use it to evoke the sense or feeling that they're wanting to express in the scene of the art, or you can intentionally subvert it slightly to create a sense of other. Because but it definitely has to be clear that it's a sense of other. If you were trying, it would just look wrong if it's clearly some location, you know, on Earth that everything is normal except for the color. Although that in itself could be something that the artist is trying to portray. This seems like a nice, cheery, you know, beach sunset evening, and yet you make all the colors off. You're going to look at it and think, that looks wrong. And maybe that's what they're trying to evoke in that sense, that something's off. So it very much can be used, and you should pay attention to what colors artists are using, because rarely are they just throwing whatever color they feel out there. And again, we're going to look at the very end. I've got some examples of some of the main colors and artists and how they've used it, and kind of the purpose for that. And so it's usually, like Picasso's a good example. He constantly played around with color and painted all with one type of color or few colors based on his moods, which goes into color psychology as well. But it has a sense of temperature as well. And he would change, and during different periods in his life, he painted with different colors. And it was very intentional, his choice of color. Because he felt that was a huge aspect of the art, right? Rather than not so much the object or subject of which he was doing, but that the color component was essential to it. And really, that often plays a key role within the art. It's not just what is drawn or painted, but the colors that are being used to do so. Now, also something that can be used with artists can use, here we're on 5 here, I think, is you have complementary colors. So complementary colors are what can be found on the opposite sides of the color wheel. And when these complementary colors, when they're mixed together, they actually create gray or black colors, and they don't look good. So complementary colors are not about mixing them together. However, when next to each other, they intensify each other. Now, this is often used, this and analogous, but especially complementary colors are often used in makeup as well. Being able to pick which colors will allow the other to pop is using and picking complementary colors. So complementary colors that go together, green and red, blue and orange, yellow and purple, blue-green, and red-orange, yellow-green, and red-purple, and blue-purple, and yellow orange. I don't know if you can hear my dog in the background, but she's seriously sprinting back and forth. She hasn't been able to get outside because of the smoke. Okay, sorry. It's making me laugh. They're going crazy. I'm sorry if you can hear. So the blue green or green red blue orange. Let's look at a couple examples of that. And again, when I'm talking again about opposite sides of the color wheel, so green and red are going to be complementary colors. And you see this, like I said, I think one of the most clear places to actually see this is actually with makeup. But it also works in art if you're trying to pick colors that you put side by side that are going to cause them to be more intense and stand out, then kind of blend together. Likewise, you can use analogous colors that actually kind of dull each other and make the colors not as intense. Blue and orange, right? Yellow and purple. Literally, you just, if you want to know which ones go, you just find the opposite on the color wheel. So here's an example of this, right, is that you have complements and analogous. So look at the difference here of yellow and purple. And let's take another one of these, the yellow and orange or the yellow and green, right? That these are brighter than the color combinations from that are analogous. So that's the other one, right? Analogous or complementary. I think these are great examples too. Is that just doesn't quite pop the same way that, oh, I didn't put the one in your book. They have one where they have eyeshadow. And it shows them using the complementary colors and how that would use. Or if you wanted it to be, like I said, not quite as bright or intense, then you could intentionally use analogous colors. But generally speaking, what we look at and go, oh, that looks good together, especially are complementary colors. Okay, so discard. Let's look at, I just want to show you this one. This is a color value, and looking at how you have colors that are starting from white to black, but then picking a color of red and having the different values and shades being added because you have it just being added darker and darker in that. This is part of that value scale, but it's specifically looking at the level of darkness through black being added to the color. And what it can give you is a sense of value. I mean, it's the whole purpose of value scales that I had you look at, to being able to identify whether something has more, that these would be perceived as, even though this is adding to it, what does it do when it has white added to it versus when it has black being added to it? And we're at the 50% dark, what color are you at versus when you get down to a really, really dark shade. And this is just helpful for not only identifying whether it's a tint or shade, but also in a value scale in general, being able to identify those transitions of that color and how that can be used in art to really better utilize color in artwork versus just kind of haphazardly picking a shade. Instead, you're intentionally looking at the value scale and deciding where that's going to go. Also, value scale plays a role in light and how much light is being reflected off of it. Okay, what we're going to look at next is color psychology. And with this, we're on 6, I think. Color psychology is the idea of mixing it, and certainly color temperature is part, you could say, is part of color psychology in many ways. But color psychology is a more intentional aspect of using color to evoke my pen doesn't want to work now. Emotions and really reactions in a person. This is often based on culture. So what we view as color, and what we view as that color is often colored and shaped by our culture. I gave the example before of a wedding dress, right? And so for us, we tend to think of a wedding and wedding dress as white, right, for the US. But for China, it's usually red. And so certain things like that can change what we view of that. And what happens is that pretty much everything can be associated to a color or colors because of products. So this can be, you can think about, right, it can be feelings and emotions. It can be objects. It can be products, which can be objects, but specifically like things that you buy. It can be nature, right? And so on and so on. That we can connect everything with color. And so what is done in color psychology is one, just how we associate color and our reactions to it. Now, in art, right, the artist can use that to intentionally evoke feelings or connection, an idea even, based on the color that they used. You also see it a ton in advertisements. And this is more the manipulative side of it's used. One, sometimes it's just used because we've already associated the color with that product because that's what's been used. But they also do it to try to get us to want to spend money or eat or recycle, right? That because there's this, so that would be another one to put in as action. Certain actions are associated with color as well. A good example of this is pink. Pink is interesting because there's a couple of things. Pink tends to have, because it's got the lighter, you think because it's a derivative of red in many ways, that it would have this sense of like emotion and a fiery passion kind of thing, heat. But pink tends to be a calming color. What's interesting is that for the longest time in US history even, pink was connected to men, right? We think of pink now as, and that's another thing, right? We connect gender sometimes, gender to color. That happens too. Blue, pink, but even yellows and greens, like so that those become neutral versus gender based. But pink was associated with boys for the longest time. Baby boys wore pink, and only more recently was pink transferred to be a girl color, and blue became a boy color. Pink was seen as masculine for the longest time. But it was always seen as kind of a more calming color. And so a jail actually did an experiment where they painted one of their holding cells pink, the walls pink, and then put some prisoners before they went into general population into the pink room, others into the regular room, because they were trying to see if they could decrease the number of fights and agitation that inmates went into the general population with. And what they found is that inmates who stayed in the pink room for a period of time before they went to the general population tended to be calmer, and in that section there were less fights than those who were in the other room. Now they would need to do more follow-up experiments to say definitively, and color psychology doesn't always work. This isn't a hard fact science, right? This is something that can create these feelings. It's not guaranteed and not for every person because of your own experiences and cultural background and how that influences how you view things. So again, don't think that this is 100%, but these things do play a part. So think about like what color you might wear in a shirt. If you're wanting to evoke a certain type of feeling of confidence or assertiveness, right? There's different colors that actually are going to portray that. And now, is everyone going to pick up on that? No. But subconsciously, some will. Likewise, in art, it's used to also display that with what they might put if they're drawing, especially like in not comic books, but the derivative of that with the graphic novels. And if they're using color, they'll often pick their characters and the specific colors that they wear, or the villains what they wear. They'll pick the color to create that sense of evil, good and evil, or pure, which was often associated with white, but also other colors, or being strong or weak. And then when the character is in a weaker state, they have a different color components around them, or on the color of shirt they're wearing, versus later when they're more assertive and self-assured. So it's in everything we do and see. Again, you don't always pick up on it. It doesn't always work. Just like with advertising. So let's take a look at advertising. Actually, let's take a look at the art, and then we'll look at the advertising examples. Actually, the advertising examples we'll do first. So I may be indecisive here, that because those actually show some of what the colors in me. And this is why I had you do of writing down and thinking about. And this is a good example of with each of these colors, writing down what comes to mind, right? What objects, what. Even like, someone with yellow put Minions. Well, yeah, because that then has been associated with them because there's so much yellow. Or green is not only money, because money is green for us, but also can be as envy, or also nature and earth and recycling. It's not a coincidence that recycling usually is connected to the color green, because we look at nature and earth and there's a lot of green in certain times of seasons and locations, especially with trees and plants and things like that. But if you, have a different culture where money isn't green, then you're not necessarily going to evoke maybe envy and money with it. Although this is how much color has gotten connected into our the psychology component. You say green with envy. Oh, someone's green with envy. Not that people say that all the time, but I've heard it before said in books and movies, and it's a saying. You're green with envy, and that's because we've associated that color with it. So, for example, here are red, right, and it talks about mental association. So hot, fire, heat, blood. But you also have Christmas, right? Valentine's Day, because it's connected to heart as love. Christmas, you've got the green and reds, passion, exciting, active, intense, rage. That's what you do too, right? Is that it's both love and rage, strength, health, vigor, lust, danger. So like you have these different things. So think about then with red, with those type of associations, how you have ads that use red to sell their product, or for movies, right? So, and here it's blood, so it's expected that way. But, or Armageddon, the red looks like, as far as it be the world kind of on fire or ending. This one's very Eros, which is that, love and lust, and it's just this red velvet. The Queen of Hearts, because of hearts, the red. This there looks ominous with the red light. The shoe, the red shoe, which also could, you know, could be the, if you're looking at like these different associations, right? Leadership, courage, vigor, anger, right? Passion. Red is often associated with passion. And like positive, that can be positive or negative. So, I mean, that these are intentional with the color usage when they're advertising this. Green, right? Green is connected to nature, water, refreshing, but it also can be, right, finances, fertility, luck, charity, growth, ambition, greed, jealousy. So let's look at some of those. I mean, this one here, envy, right? Green with envy. And then what we had, jealousy, which would connect to envy sometimes, discord, ambition, success. Well, that's because connected to the money and stuff that way. So 7-Up, refreshing, right? That refreshing sense. Or here, green, the green book is meant to be with, of course, recycling and nature. Here you have a lot of green to emphasize that as well. I mean, we even have the word like going green now, right? That statement also connected to a color with that. So that you have that these ads or movie posters that are meant to create that sense of it. I mean, here, think green, and then they're using the green. Fresh packed gum, right? And even though the Mentos gum is strawberry, they're putting the green next to it with a hint of lime, as that it's meant to be that refreshing, cool burst, right? You tend to think with green with that. Alien, we do actually tend to think aliens as little green men, right? Or a green giant. Okay, so then yellow, you have sunlight, of course, passion, warmth, joy. Joy is a big one. Bright, because it's bright and cheery. So, welcome back to school. Bright and cheery, upbeat, dreamer. And you've got the sun, but it's also meant to this bright thing. We tend to think of yellow as happy. It's active, it's happy. It's in a more exciting color. And then blue, besides cold and water, that it can be gloomy. It can be usually, that's the I'm feeling blue. There's how we use it in emotion. I'm feeling blue. Usually blue is more depressive, gloomy, sad, calm, but it can also be calm. It can also be, like they mentioned, devotion, tranquil, soft, calm, understanding. Somber is a good word for it. So like the World Trade, even Superman Returns, that's meant to, up here, it's meant to be a somber moment. Lightning Thief, right? He's supposed to be Poseidon's son, and he's in the water. Mentos is cool and refreshing. Oceans make sense, right? So you've got a lot of water images. Air also makes sense, but a lot of water, snow types of images, which is going to evoke the temperature with the color, or that sense of calm or cool, which is also the temperature aspect as well. And then the somber we see with some of these up here. Okay, so the idea is just to pay attention. If you're looking at ads, if you see ads, and how are they using them? Black obviously creates a dark, mysterious, potentially dangerous feeling. So the Punisher or Batman Begins, right? It looks ominous. Even like Spider-Man, and when he has the the darker, the symbiote, thing that with the suit, it's all black. But yeah, the mysterious, dangerous, ominous style. It can also be luxury. So you'll see that with cars or drinks. Black is this, like I said, you either have kind of luxury items, the black card, which is the credit card that's a black card that's for very wealthy people. You tend to get that associated with that color. And then white, you tend to get with pure. Divine, meditation, youthful, clean. It can also sometimes be good. So just think about, like I said, pay attention how weddings, how color is used in advertisements when you see it on TV or you see it in print or on the internet. Think about when you're looking at why did they choose that color? Because advertising firms employ psychology and psychologists to think about how they're presenting stuff to try to get you to want to buy it or to buy into what they're advertising. And so very much can be used like that. And then if we look at artists and how they use it, here we can kind of go through. So blue, again, as I mentioned, Picasso, right? Sorrow. When he was in his kind of depressive phase, he did a ton with blue. And that was intentional, not just subconscious. But you also have Monet, where it creates this sense of calming, serene impact. And then we have red. And this one, I mean, this is a good one. The scream, right? And this a sense of unease and being unsettled. It can also be passion and intense, but it's meant to be this, not quiet artwork in that sense. And then this one's talking about complementary colors, right? Love and emotion when paired with complementary colors. You have the rage and anger and intensity, and then you also have a warm, comforting feel of love. So red is very dualistic in how it's shown in art. Yellow. Here we have Van Gogh, one of his most famous ones. A lot of Van Gogh stuff is famous, but I always remember the sunflower one. Happy, bright, vivacious sunflowers, I think, often invoke that sense as well. This one with the Yellow Christ, which is specifically titled the Yellow Christ. It can be a sense of, it mentions it here, right? Unpleasantness and abrasiveness, especially when it's done in colors that aren't supposed to be that color. Okay, right? Sunflowers are supposed to be yellow, and so it's going to create more of a bright, cheery nature because it's also a flower and it's that color. But everything is yellow in this picture, right? With Van Gogh. But here, the Yellow Christ, you have a more sense of not just unease, but that you almost look sickly or not well, because that's not the normal color of what it's supposed to be. And so it can be used, and we think that with yellow, as yellow and green sometimes as sick, because those colors are somewhat what you can tend to look if you're not feeling good, if you're not healthy. And so most of the colors have that dualistic sense of one is bright and cheery and happy, and then this other, unhappy, sick, unease. Green, right? Not surprising, nature, right? You have anything that's going to want to show this kind of lush green pastoral scene. Artists use green to showcase. But then green with prosperity and wealth because of money. And so black is also luxury, but green often symbolizes that as well. So here you have with a portrait, especially if when you look at portraits that were done of wealthy individuals, you tend to see green either in the background or in the clothing that they're wearing. Orange can be bright and not only warm but vivacious. Here we have the sunset, and it kind of pops with those colors. It also can be used as is talking about here, extravagance, because it grabs attention. It also is just something that can be used if you really want something to pop, where because it's bright, it grabs your attention and is going to create a focal point to that area and location. Purple. Purple is connected to royalty. Interesting enough, purple in a lot of cultures represented royalty. So this bottom one here, well, I guess neither one of these examples, but purple often is seen as something that is, oh, here on the first one here, luxury, because purple was connected to royalty. And actually only like kings and queens could wear purple in several cultures. So there still is a sense of purple as that luxury component to it. And then it can also be, if it's lighter colors of purple, relaxation. This is Georgia O'Keeffe with Purple Leaves, right, which is not a natural color of leaves, but it creates this very calming sense because it's using softer hues of purple. Like lavender, and that lighter, soft sense is gonna, with purple, creates a calmer component. Then white, as we talked about, right? Purity. It can also peace, brightness, positive, sometimes even good versus evil. It also, they're mentioning here, could be highlighting something dark and can be representing death and mourning. But you more often see it in terms of connecting to purity. And then black, we saw it with tenebrism, the type of chiaroscuro that was the darker use of dark colors to create a more ominous sense with a lighted area, a single lighted focus that then one makes that stand out, but creates a darker mood around. So that's something, this is Rembrandt's The Night Watch, and it's meant to create, like I said, this you have a central focus with a light source, but everything else around it is this darker, surrounded darker area. And that's very much the use of that sense of feeling of mystery, of ominous, mystery, uncertainty, the unknown. It also can be luxury and power, right? Where you have wealth or control or power. And so you have very different, one is this dark ominous and the other is this, sense of envy almost for the luxury items. But again, just the idea of, if you're looking through these, how we see artists use art, our color, to create the mood and sense that they want, how it's used then later in advertisements and print to somewhat manipulate us to have a particular feeling towards the object they're selling. Okay, that's it for color and color theory. So we will stop there.